Until Rahul comes, thanks everybody for coming for this, what I call the last leg sessions, which are always hard, and especially to match up to the whole day's, agenda. And I'm sure everybody is looking forward to the award ceremony and the cocktails and dinner after that. So we promise to make this worth your while. I think one of the things that always strikes me whenever these days I talk about privacy is what Forrester, said about a while ago. So Forrester has made a statement at the beginning of 2016 saying that the year 2016 is to privacy what the year 2000 was to websites. I mean, I'll let that sink in for a bit. So I don't know how many of you were at a working age level in the year 2000, but those of you who've seen the year 2000, it was when people were really trying to figure out what websites were all about, and after that things just took off. So they've actually said that 2016 is that year. And globally, not just in India, globally there's been lots of development in this area. Regulations have changed, new legislations have come in. The whole SMAC angle, social, mobile analytics and cloud, has put a completely different spin on, how data privacy is looked at. People are finally beginning to understand how data privacy is different from data protection. So, and it's a very exciting time in India. I know that the media keeps talking about how, there is no law around privacy and there's a lot of hoo-ha around it. But let's just restrict ourselves to where most of us come from, which is body corporates, where we do have the sensitive data protection rules under Section 43A, which is all about privacy. So, keeping all of that in mind, this is, as I say, an exciting phase for privacy, just the beginning. We're lucky to have an eminent panel here, which has been working in this niche and nascent area. And I think I'll let them talk more about this. Rahul, we were just giving a context till you joined us.
No, sure.
So the way we are going to structure this is that Rahul is going to take us through an exciting app that they have launched, which basically helps organizations understand where they stand vis-a-vis privacy. We thought that will set an excellent sort of context to what we are going to be discussing further. And so we'll start with the demo. We'll do a round of discussions post that, so that we're all on the same page in terms of, and let's understand what ideas are there around privacy and how do we deal with this opportunity on one hand and the fact that there's a severe resource crunch on the other, and how do we make things work in this kind of an environment. And we'll wrap up with another interesting presentation that Pradeep has, which is going to give us a flavor of how products can be used to deal with this complex area. Okay? So over to you, Rahul. You can start off.
Okay. Thank you, Shivangi. Thank you very much. I must thank this audience for being so patient. I kind of, Shivangi, I always say that I've got 3 fears that I live with. Everybody has got some fears in life, and I do have those 3 fears. I thought I'll share it with you. My first fear is the fear of height. I'm very afraid of height. I really can't go to the skyscrapers, so I'm the person who has to be kept at a distance in tourist places. My family goes, I stay behind. My second fear is my wife. For she really, for she really catching me watch an FTV content at the middle of the night. I hope someday I will have my privacy rights prevailed at home. And my third fear is something I'm just about getting a balance of it, that I get invited to speak in a session where there are more people this side than that side. So with that, thank you very much, DSCI, for inviting us over. This is a very important subject and a very pertinent topic that we have picked up. Privacy as we see it, I think there is just a whole lot of things which are going around there. And since morning, you have been listening to the numbers, the stats, the cybersecurity. I just want to set a little bit of context and then get to a little bit of convergence of ideas to how we believe we can really raise the privacy consciousness and implementation. So, and this is very important. I was kind of reading it somewhere. It says that by 2020, we're going to have 20 billion connected devices, right? The extent of penetration of wearables is phenomenal, right? We also, there are some studies which indicate that we are perhaps in last 2 years, we have generated more data than ever in the history of humankind. And having said that, by the year 2020, we would be generating something like 1.76 megabytes of data per second by every human being on Earth. Now, this is bizarre. This is really bizarre. But when I come and put this thing into a context, there is one thing which worries all the more, and that's the theme that we have all gathered here, is the number of data breaches. The rise of the technology, the connectedness over it, and the number of breaches equally on the rise and more. This really puts data security and privacy at the center of things. So I just want to kind of set the tone here to say that, yes, it's a very pertinent topic. Specifically, when it comes to the implementation side of things, the ballgame is very different. And today, I've consciously chosen to speak about the Indian context of how privacy is being looked upon. Okay? There are 4 dimensions, if I were to say, how we look at the privacy implementation, some of the challenges. These dimensions are adoption, right? Regulation, interpretation, and awareness. I'm going to take a minute to just speak briefly about it, and then I'm going to take share the views around it. So, if you really look at privacy, the very need stems from the fact of its customers. So organizations, they look at an implementation of privacy standard or framework because privacy has been asked by their customers and their stakeholders. So this is a typical example of service providers who are in the capacity of data processors, right? Having obligations towards having a privacy framework. So now just bring this frame back in the Indian context, right? It is the IT enablement services. It's a technology sector who are the first movers into it in terms of embracing it. And Shinjoy is going to talk, there are some great implementations. You're going to hear more from Shinjoy about how they have done it in their organization. But beyond technology, IT-enabled services, and to an extent, I would say telecom, because they were the early adopters of technology and the sheer size of data, and of course, TRI has played a role. There is actually very little attention, focus, and implementation by other sectors. Now, talk about healthcare. Is healthcare not privy to the kind of information which qualifies to be personally identifiable? So is e-commerce. Now, here is a bit of dilemma and a dissonance to say that when we look at India, when we look at our own country, there are certain sectors who have done really well in the adoption of the privacy standards and frameworks. However, there is a lot to be done. And a part of it, which gets me to my second point, a related one, which is called regulation. Data Protection Act came sometime in '95, and now we are talking about GDPR, the Global Data Privacy Directive, which came early in the year, and I think there is an implementation period. So look at the kind of positive impact it has had on the technology industry, especially the service providers who are the data processors, right? I believe that it's been time that privacy bill has been in its infancy and probably has, in some ways, and I hope I don't get quoted, has slept somewhere. IT Act came in, raised the hope. There are sections that does talk about privacy requirements, and I'm not making a critical comment here. All I'm trying to say here is that regulation does drive the adoption. So that's the point where I think we are very hopeful that we heard the minister earlier in the year about the right to privacy, and probably the privacy bill would see its end of light someday. But it remains to be seen that how do we drive the regulation? How does regulation drive privacy across other sectors? So those are the 2 points. Now the third point is interpretation, right? Now privacy is a subject. It requires deep interpretation of its nuances. Now I'm sure all of you and all of us have looked at the big debate of one of the largest technology companies against the US Department of Justice. Microsoft against Department of Justice, and the lawsuit has been in favor of Microsoft. as the government said that any company which is headquartered in US, the government has got a right to access of records, while the company said, look, if I'm a cloud service provider, it actually impacts the privacy of my customers. So, and the decision was a landmark judgment. It was given in favor of the company. Now, here comes the interpretation and the skill sets required to interpret that. Another related element of interpretation is ramifications. If you look at GDPR, right? So if you are on the wrong side of the law, they've kind of given a 2 years of window, but if you are on the wrong side of the law, you are perhaps inviting penalty as high as 4% of your turnover as a company, and a 20 million, or Rahul has got more details, he can correct me. So that's the kind of thing. Interpretation and skill building is very important when we look at the third dimension in terms of having a privacy framework to be implemented. And finally, it is the last link. We often call it as the weakest link. It is the awareness. Awareness of people at all levels. And I would focus here on the fact that perhaps we are a generation, or what we see in privacy is too much gets given too quickly. And privacy in some ways is directly proportional to the culture of the geography where it has been implemented. So awareness is another aspect. So with these 4 dimensions, I feel that the bar for the privacy can really be raised from an implementation standpoint. And the picture is not all that dull. I also want to spend a minute on the positive drivers, the trends, which are actually the right forces for us to see the optimism in all of it. Now, when I say that, Government of India in the last 2 years have launched a number of initiatives. Now, just take an example of the largest citizen charter program, which is Aadhaar. See the amount of data which gets captured. See the amount of data that's going to get handled. So we will see something coming on the privacy side of things. Similarly, DigiLocker is another initiative which has been spoken very extensively, where government is kind of working on it. So DigiLocker, Aadhaar, and similarly a whole lot of things. In fact, there is a very recent, it's a very recent circular on the banks, on the lines of the cybersecurity, where the PPI license has been extended and there are some privacy requirements mentioned there. So there is a ray of hope. Add to this is the global trend that we have got a whole 2 years kind of a implementation life cycle under the GDPR, which really will give the impetus. So the point here is that we get to, organizations have to start looking at privacy by design, right? And the very first step to do that is really the awareness. And when I say awareness, it is self-awareness, right? I'm very pleased to share with the audience through this platform, rather a prestigious platform of Data Security Council of India, that we have been working with the DSCI to see if we could work and help the community with some kind of application, some kind of assessment tool, so that they get self-aware about their obligations, privacy implementation challenges, and their preparedness. Right, at this stage, I would like to invite Rahul, if you want to just throw a light, and then how we have got to the tangibility of it.
DSCI started working on the DSCI privacy framework in 2010. By then, I was not in DSCI. But I think DSCI privacy framework, most of you would be aware of, is a compilation of best practices that the organizations need to implement to mature their privacy program. It's divided into 9 practice areas. And some of them, just for easy reference, are like visibility of personal information. How does an organization maintain visibility on where the information is, how it is stored, who accesses it, and who shares it? What are the security controls and technical controls applied to it? Personal privacy organizational relationships. What is the privacy structure and the organization's relationship? Who leads the privacy program? Where does it report into, etc. So all this is done. So that privacy framework was developed in 2010. I think that's when the organizations started to engage, and that's where the dialogue on having a privacy program in India started to begin. And we were very hopeful that the organizations such as the outsourcing industry, because they are, the privacy program is majorly driven by the global clients. So they will be the ones who will pick up the privacy framework first. But to our surprise, it is the domestic industry, telecom, banking, and to an extent manufacturing, that picked up the privacy framework and started implementing it. Because in 2011, the IT Act rules had come in, and the organizations were required to have certain practices that Rahul also alluded to. So in that context, we also started working with different organizations and different consulting firms, all big four. KPMG was one of the most proactive ones to develop privacy tools and solutions that can help the organization. But over the years, there was nothing very tangible, visible, that the organizations can use, a ready tool that they can use and implement. So different organizations, not just big four, but also others, they started working on a tool or a matrix or a checklist that can help them, measure the baseline on privacy, where they stand and what are the gaps and where do they see themselves 5 years down the line on privacy implementation. So we also parallelly developed privacy assessment certification and privacy assessment program for the organizations that they can undertake to check their privacy readiness. So it's a very difficult task to really assess a privacy program from an organization. The challenge being because it's not a very control-centric framework. It's a very best practices framework that we have developed as DSCI privacy framework. So then KPMG also started interacting with us. How do we take this work of DSCI privacy framework forward and develop a tool which is easy to understand, a layman can use it, and it gives us a meaningful result to the organizations on how, where they stand in terms of privacy preparedness. And we had some initial discussions, and the KPMG team was working on the tool. And last month they got back to us, that this is something that we have worked on for over almost 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, Atul?
Yeah.
Around 2 years?
Yeah.
And they said, we have worked on it and we have developed an application that can help organizations. So I said, why not discuss it at a forum? Because maybe you can want to have the participant feedback, who are the privacy leaders, and they will want to share it. So that's when, we also, so they got in touch with us and they asked us, so maybe we can talk about the tool, and maybe we can ask the audience, the privacy experts, to share their inputs and opinions on what the tool is. Does it really capture the privacy preparedness and the baseline of the organizations? If there is a scope for improvement, there sure is. So we also reviewed the tool, I think today morning with Rahul and his team. So we also had some inputs to give, and we also expect the audience to maybe review the tool and if they want to give any feedback. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rahul. In fact, Rahul has been very modest. DSCI has been a big contributor in the content of it, because it is the framework, the data privacy framework, which is the basis for this self-assessment tool. So without holding on, we would like to...
I need to leave. I have some work to do on awards. I'll see you at the DSCI awards ceremony, sorry. I had a guest appearance here, sorry.
Thanks, Rahul. Thank you very much. Okay. Maybe put the... Yeah, okay. So there you see this. This is an app. This is a smart app available on your smartphone. And this is available on our stores for the Google as well as iPhone. And here is how it works. As you click on it, so there is a page that opens up which says that enter your details in terms of your, I think you're already logged in, right? Right. So it will ask you for your name and a password, as simple as that. You log into any app. And then it allows you to get into the various menu options. And I want to stop here for a moment to just kind of explain you what it is on the dimensions that it works, right? The first is for an organization to know what is their risk of exposure. Now that's really the outcome. What is the risk of exposure when it comes to the privacy? Now this is dependent on the kind of business you are into, the kind of geography you are working, literally a sense of the privacy liability, so to say, right? So privacy risk of exposure. So that's one tangent, that's one angle. The second angle is what, as Rahul mentioned, and that is where a whole merit of what we have done over here is bringing up the data privacy framework, the concepts, and it tells you through a questionnaire as you answer it that what is your level of preparedness to mitigate those risks. So you understand here, you get the risk of exposure from the privacy standpoint, what really stands for you to look into, and then it tells you that this is the kind of level of preparedness you have, and then accordingly you can get to know through some charts, through some maps, and there are readable reports, what is it that you should be focusing on as 1, 2, 3 in your organization immediately. So we'll just take you through what it is. We enter the name, David, ABC Company. You launch the self-assessment. You see three options over there: self-assessment, secure. I think I'll come there. That's more easier. So we launch the self-assessment. We get to the next page. Showing up here. Okay. Now you see the various options over here, right? We get to take your self-assessment, and then you've got these modules. As I said, there are two parts to it. One will tell you the risk of exposure. The second is going to tell you the level of preparedness you have. Privacy exposure. We get to this, and we answer certain questions. Go ahead. So this is just a demo. It will take about 10 to 12 minutes for you to finish all of it. But for the purpose and the paucity of time, we'll just keep it to a couple of things just to show certain features and then move on.
Yeah,
so you answer certain questions.
You'll do this in about 5 minutes, the demo?
Yeah, we'll finish in next 2.5 minutes. That's my promise to you. Okay. You answer the question, the kind of industry that you are into, because it's very important for you to know that what really is a risk of exposure, what is the level of regulation that applies on you, so and so forth. So you say that, then you also mention that what is your geographical spread? Are you an organization, kind of one center, many centers, global, this, that? So you answer all of those questions. And then how do you rate the level of data privacy and the regulation in the countries you operate in? So again, that's an important question for you to kind of reflect that what is your privacy liability. It also talks about the number of people who are part of the data processor work processes, so to say, right? So which is the strength. And then it goes to the nature of your business. Does it require compliance to the international? So like this, there are a series of questions. Shubham, can you just go on to the next, which is on the DSCI. And then you come to the second module. Are you with me? Till this point, are you with me? Okay. We come to the second point, which is telling you that what is your privacy exposure. You answer certain questions there. Yeah, so this is telling you the level of preparedness, right? This is telling you the level of preparedness basis the controls that you've already kind of built in. I'm sure there would be some kind of privacy framework you would already be following. So it just takes the merit of it and puts it over here, maps it to the DSCI framework on privacy, and gives you a report. Let's move to the few more questions. So visibility of your personal data, how is it? How many people are looking into it? What are the responsibilities? Now this is absolutely mapped to the DSCI framework on the privacy. And when you map 1 and 2, just move on to the reporting side of it. You answer a set of questions over here. This is what you get to see, right? So this is a very quick snapshot. In 12.5, 15 minutes, you can actually get to know on an X and Y axis with a heat map, what are the real priorities? Provided you got to answer this question, we got to be truthful to the questionnaire because tool is only as smart as we would want it to be. Right, so we get to a point where we get to see the heat map, we know what our priorities are, and we can immediately start focusing on things which requires immediate management attention with respect to your privacy exposure. The reports are downloadable on various formats. It's completely friendly around that. And as you see, just go back to the heat map. I just want to spend a couple of seconds. Go back to the heat map. So you see the X and the Y axis over here. So the Y axis tells you what is the level of preparedness, and the X axis tells you what is the level of preparedness. The Y axis tells you the risk of exposure, and the red, amber, green has got a connotation and a meaning to it. So as you mature in your organization with implementation of, obviously what is expected, you move from red to amber to green, which is a better state of maturity. So you can do this assessment as many times as you would want to be, as many times as you would want it to be, with a logical milestone as you see it. So that's what we have worked with the DSCI. We are very pleased to launch the app. We hope that this app is going to make a difference to all the privacy professionals, the data privacy officers, and who are there in the audience. And we are more than happy to answer any questions, follow on. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks a lot, Rahul. I think that set a excellent context to putting together what privacy is about and giving a quick overview to the DPF, the DSCI privacy framework also, thanks to the app. And I'm sure a lot of us over here will be able to really use this for kickstarting maybe a privacy program. Now, with this context, I'm going to turn to Shinjoy. Shinjoy, if you could share with us, you've been running a privacy program in a company that is across, the program is across multiple geographies, multiple countries, work as a data processor as well as maybe a controller in a lot of ways. Could you share with us that, what it takes to implement a program like this, the challenges faced and so on?
So first of all, I would like to say that privacy as a concept, at least in India, has come very recently. It still, the awareness is still nascent. However, what we as a company do, since we are global in our exposure, what we as a company do is look at the gold standard. So the gold standard is the EU. So we look at that framework and we model all our resources and all our entire program according to that. So as of now, the GDPR is going to be operational from May of 2018. So one of the things that we are right now doing is looking at how to implement what is called the binding corporate rules as per the GDPR. What it will also do is will give a self-check to us as a company to see where we are on our privacy program, how is it working, how is it, because the BCR is actually at the highest standard that is there. It talks about privacy impact assessment, it talks about privacy by design, it talks about various things. So that's where we are heading. On the other side, we are also looking at various geographies. For example, US, we would look at a HIPAA for healthcare or a GLP if it is applicable. The way our structure is, obviously we are data processors primarily, but now as per the GDPR, it's becoming more and more that the processors are also going to be held liable for the acts of the controller. So that's why it's so very important that we have to set our house in order if it's not there, to come to a situation wherein we are ready by the time in 2018 the GDPR is applicable.
Let me ask you this, since it's a multi-country implementation, the program, do you have different privacy policies in different geographies, or is there a common sort of threshold that everybody adheres to because you're a part of a global setup?
So the way we do it is that we have a broad global policy, but we have sectoral policies also. So for example, a HIPAA will have a different policy and a different guideline to it, but there will be an overarching data privacy policy. By the way, the data privacy policy of ours has been vetted by the data processing authorities in EU. So we are compliant to the compliant to the highest standard.
Okay, wonderful. So then let me ask you a question from the Indian point of view, which is that, as we just discussed, the GDPR is the gold standard, and the US has had HIPAA for a long time, and privacy is fairly mature in some of these markets. Whereas in India, as we just discussed, it's fairly new and nascent. How do you manage to run a program, at least for the the areas that you are responsible for, when it comes to having basic resources to manage a program like this?
So again, the way privacy professionals are very few and far in between. There are more security professionals than privacy professionals. But the way that we look at it, as we have the entire legal and the compliance team helping out and doubling up as privacy experts in the areas wherever they are. Also, we have down the line, we have the compliance people who are, again, from a privacy perspective, they look at how operationally, what are we collecting, how we are accessing the data, what are the compliances that the client has brought to us. Internally also, we have internal from if there is the HR information that is there or medical records that is there, how we, so it all rolls up to at the corporate level to the data privacy team.
So let me ask you a slightly personal question, given that there are quite a few people here who are either already privacy, handling privacy responsibilities or aspiring to.
Yeah.
What got you into,
this? Fate. So, but 3 years ago, I actually am an intellectual property professional. 3 years ago, I got into it because it just seemed a natural progression into an already in an area which is, we are talking in intellectual property, we are already also talking about data. So it was a natural progression. But it's been an interesting 3 years. And thanks to DSCI again, wherein they have this fantastic framework that they have worked with.
Thanks, Shanjoy. I think I'll come over to Pradeep. So Pradeep, you have, while they've talked about some of the challenges and what the framework is about, ultimately when an organization rolls out a privacy program, you have to look at many controls, right? And controls can be technology controls, you can have products to implement. Since you come from the product side of things, can you give us an idea of what are the kind of areas where one can use products, you can use automated solutions to handle implementation of a privacy program or assessing or auditing a privacy program?
See, I come from an organization who is basically into data recovery. It all started with data recovery, and then slowly and slowly we could find out that most of the organizations, while they have effective controls within the ecosystem, like the IT devices which generally they use, laptops, desktops, mobile devices, while they are in an ecosystem, they have a fair bit of control on how it is being used and where it is being used. But while they go out of the ecosystem, they simply format and give it to a third party. So initially it started with the information security risk, but now it correlates because it's a very thin line between information security and data privacy which is being happening now. So although we are at a very early stage, but if we see this, if we see from the data privacy perspective, the first thing which we start with is how much personal data is my organization is dealing with. So any information which probably is used on its own or probably with some other information to locate an individual would be a PII. So first I need to understand what are the obligations towards my business, towards the law. And then I need to measure, as my co-panelist already told, the risks associated with it. Then, of course, privacy by design talks about maybe core areas and end-to-end security. So while we say end-to-end security means it starts from the day when the IT assets enters the ecosystem and it leaves the ecosystem. So our product, which we thought takes care of this area where the IT device leaves the ecosystem. So yeah.
So you're going to show us a
presentation? I want to take you through this, but before I would like to tell you that there are a few developments from the statutory things also, because apart from data privacy, there is another thing which is being talked about now is saving our earth. So there is another different aspect to it, which will be clear through this presentation of mine, which will take around 5-6 minutes.
Okay.
So may I?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
5 minutes, huh? Yeah, sure. Maybe if you could focus on the privacy bit more rather than the other aspects, since that's the
So I'll
focus
just
of
take
this
you
program.
through the things. So it talks about best practices. So what happens, there are few instances here which has happened in past with very eminent organizations, including you all know about TalkTalk, which has happened in the past. So if the data falls into wrong hands, massive loss in goodwill as well as revenue losses. So we talk about data vulnerability or the data breach, which my co-panelist Rahul, probably these are the areas where we can give some kind of leverage to you in terms of providing a solution. Like while you dispose of your IT assets or reallocate IT assets or return your IT assets. So typical data breach scenario could be this, where you go for an replacement and the IT department probably goes to a e-waste recycler, and then probably the data is being handed over to a third party. So section 43 already is covered, so we know what are the implications under the section 43. This is a recent development which I was talking about. E-waste management rule 2011 was more of a reactive kind of a law, but now it has been made more proactive, like in the sense we need to file form 2 and a return to the state pollution control board using form 3. So whatever e-waste, electronic waste which we are creating has now to be documented, which is somehow linked to be rewards or penalties later on when we try to talk more about or enlarge our organization. So compliances, because any effective data privacy rule talks about the industry compliances, the statutory compliances, as well as what my business needs to protect to give me an edge over my competitor. So we are talking about loss of business, maybe loss of reputation, high cost of lawsuits, etc. So we have two solutions towards this. We have a software erasure, obviously disk degaussing, but disk degaussing talks about more of creating electronic waste. So we need to create less of e-waste. This was a recent study which has been done by Ministry of Environment and Forests, which says 70% of the e-waste generated by 7 cities in India. So briefly about how BitRaiser, which is a solution from Stellar regarding data privacy and mitigating data risks. So it is a certified data erasure. It gives you a permanent erasure against all recovery methods. Talks about a wider range of algorithms which you can choose from, including NIST. And then of course it helps you to generate audit trails, which can be helped you to track a complete cycle of a IT device. So these are the deployments. We have standalone deployment, we have deployment over network, and of course we have simultaneous erasure deployments for multiple hard drives. So what it will help you to safe disposal of IT assets. So at the end of the data privacy cycle, at the end of the cycle, we are now killing that even one iota of information of a chance that data could be breached. Then of course we meet our regulatory and statutory compliances, plus we contribute to the more greener part of the earth, creating less of electronic waste. That's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. And I think we have just about enough time to squeeze in maybe 2 or 3 questions. Any questions?
I have a typical question here around the role, so specifically around dealing with the people data. Regarding dealing with the people data, specifically, whose role is that to define this privacy policy, and then who should be in the role of chief privacy officer, and from which function he should be, and to whom he should be reporting in an organization?
Interesting question, which I think everybody is. So both of you, maybe you can give.
Right. So I think you'll get a more precise practitioner perspective from Shinjoy. What I can tell you is that if you really look at GDPR, I think the beauty of the new, it has evolved a lot. So what has come here, it very clearly talks about the responsibility of a data controller, data processor, data subject, and the role definition for DPO, which is called Data Privacy Officer. So to that extent, I think the verbiage is very clear, the directions are very clear that how and to what extent, what are the boundaries within which the role needs to be defined, and also what is the independence of this role. So I think that's largely on the GDPR as it says. The DSCI also does talk about how various roles in an organization they need to be defined and what is the level of independence they should have. So again, depending on the size of the business, and this is also dependent in a function of where are you in the value chain between the data processor and data controller. So if you are doing, if you are really moving up, then the roles then again change accordingly. So that's more of a view from the regulatory side of things. But Srinjoy.
So I think also, is your question about who should it be, the data privacy officer? Who should it be? Yeah.
Who should be accountable within the organization for
Yeah.
it?
So the way the data privacy officer is placed, he has to be, or that team has to be both technical as well as legal. Legal to understand the nuances of law, and technical enough to understand how the systems are moving. So the person will have to be both, and they will have to be either, in some organizations it rolls up to the CISO, in some organization it rolls up to the legal general counsel. There is no best. It is about the organization, how the organization is moving.
No, so I think if you look at even within India, if you look at some organizations in the same sector, one of same stature and same size, you'll find one organization where the roles are split between legal and, the chief privacy officer is reporting into legal while the CISO is independent, and same, similar organization, the CISO is holding the dual role of chief privacy officer. So as he said, I think if I can
So
summarize.
for example, I'm the data privacy officer. I roll up to the general counsel, but the CISO is somebody else, and different. But I don't think there is a best in this, because it has to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Not only the organization size, even if we are two separate entities, two separate departments, it has to go hand in hand, because there will be a technical aspect to it, there will be a legal aspect to it. So you cannot say that you have to keep that separate.
I think we have time for one more question.
It's just a follow-up question. Just wanted to check who defines privacy for me as an individual. Similarly, for an organization, what is privacy?